30 years ago, when the Ford Explorer first hit showrooms, there was not a lot of crossovers or SUVs in existence. You basically had two choices if you wanted an American SUV. It was either the Explorer or the Grand Cherokee. Here we are now in the 2020s, and the list just grows with each passing year. When you take a look at these vehicles on paper, they basically do the exact same thing. They're family-friendly, they're spacious, they're practical, and also maybe even more tech-focused now, since we are in the 2020s. Some vehicles, though, diverge a bit. They become sporty and fun to drive, while also being rugged for year-round capability and versatility. And the Ford Explorer falls under that category. It's basically a jack-of-all-trades, one of the few vehicles you could claim as being a great all-around daily driver. For 2025, Ford has given this model a mid-cycle refresh, or I would call it a modest refresh. This is hardly being anything revolutionary or radical compared to what we had last year at this time. However, there is some new technology. The new exterior styling does go a long way. And for 2025, the XLT no longer exists. We have the Active. And in today's video, we're going to check out what this trim has to offer. Did Ford address some of the weak points that we experienced a couple of years ago with the XLT, and also see if it is a great value right now in the three-row crossover market. Before I get in this video, I want to give a huge shout and thank you to Acton Ford in Acton, Massachusetts for letting me come down here to check out the new Ford Explorer. Their link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive Ford inventory. So as always, let's begin with pricing. For 2025 with the Active, you're looking at a starting cost of just below $40,000. Now, one thing to keep in mind here, though, is that if you do live in colder regions of the US like I do, you'll have to go with all-wheel drive. That is not standard because this is a rear-wheel drive-based SUV. That will tack on $2,000 to the total of the Explorer. And basically, with that, you're looking at a starting cost of around $44,000 once you throw in taxes and fees. Now, our model is equipped with some optional packages and amenities, getting us to a price point of around $50 grand. Now, just like I felt with the XLT, the Active, I think, is the best value and the choice to go with if you don't care about that V6 and you don't want all the bells and whistles. You don't need a luxury crossover in this market. Now, not only has there been a renaming of this trim for 2025, you get some new design elements to this SUV that I think makes it look more streamlined, and I actually would say more upscale than in the past. Now, you got to keep in mind here with the Ford Explorer, it's always been a rugged SUV, and for earlier generations, it was built on a body-on-frame chassis. This is unibody. Now, for those of you who are wondering, since this is a mid-cycle refresh, has there been any changes to the dimensions? No, not at all. It's the exact same Explorer you had last year at this time. It just has a new front fascia and rear fascia. So starting up front, you are going to notice the new grille design. There's actually 4 new grille designs for 2025 with each trim. And I have to say, this is actually a nice touch. You have some of this chrome accent here, which goes very well with our paint color today. Also, one thing I do like here with the Active is that you will receive full LED headlights and LED turn signal indicators. That is fantastic for a base trim. On top of that, we do have the Active Comfort Package. That will give us LED fog lights, giving you more of an upscale appearance to this vehicle, but also helping out with better visibility late at night or in adverse weather conditions. What you're also going to notice too, and one thing I really do like about this model, is the active side air curtains, or functional side air curtains, giving you some better aerodynamics and airflow when you are on the back roads or just cruising on a longer road trip. Then as you make your way over to the side profile, our model is sitting on the optional 20-inch carbonized gray wheels. While a lot of you are going to say, well, the 18s will be more optimal, more comfortable, and trimmed down on that road noise, these wheels are not that bad. I've experienced them twice now with the XLT 2 years ago and now with the Active, and I have to say, it rides quite well, and that is a testament to what Ford has done here with this generation, especially for the mid-cycle refresh, where comfort seems to be a top priority, and we're going to talk about that later on once we take this vehicle out for a quick test drive. Now, with the Active, you do not get side mirror caps that are color matched. You also don't get turn signal indicators, but you do get blind spot detection for added safety and convenience. Then as you make your way around to the back, you're going to notice the new taillight design here that builds off of what you had last year, where those lights do integrate into the center portion of the rear fascia for a classy look, also very trendy as well, and that goes hand in hand with the Explorer badge written out on that tailgate. Then for the lower portion of the rear bumper, you are going to notice the cladding there, obviously with this vehicle being a rugged SUV. And then, of course, you are going to notice that contrasting accent once again. And from certain angles, you will notice the dual exhaust outlets, giving this SUV a sportier appearance on the roadways. Then before we check out the interior for the 2025 Ford Explorer Active, since we have the Active Comfort Package, we do get remote start here, so that is a great feature to have if you do live in a colder region of the US like I do up here in New England. Also, of course, from here you can open up the tailgate and lock and unlock your vehicle from this key fob. Hopping inside the Ford Explorer Active we have today, we're greeted by power adjustable and heated Active X seats for both the driver and passenger. Now this is part of the Active Comfort Package, which I do think is worth investing in and going for with your Active Explorer, most because cloth seats do come standard. And I think the Active XC material not only is more plush and upscale, but will be easier to clean if you do have some younger kids in the second and third row. Also, one thing I do like about these seats is that they do feel rather plush and comfortable. Now, on a longer drive, you will not be complaining about back pains at all. These seats provide a lot of cushioning, so I think this is the way to go. And for a vehicle that is a base trim, it doesn't feel base at all. And one thing that Ford did address was the interior quality and touch points for the dashboard, center console, and door panels. You have the soft touch materials on the center console and dashboard, and it does go a long way. The XLT I had featured a couple of years ago, even well equipped, didn't feel this nice and this upscale. Now, I know a lot of journalists would disagree with me using the term upscale, but for a vehicle under $50,000 and for a lower trim, this is going to impress you in more ways than one. Now, even though this is a modest refresh, the interior does give you some new technology, which I think is very competitive in this market. So in front of you will be a full digital gauge cluster, which is now standard across all four trims for 2025. That will immediately impress you. Now, I will be getting a little ahead of myself here because the new infotainment system is Google-based. And because it is Google-based, you'll be able to display your Google Maps to this digital gauge cluster, which is not programmed in yet. So it's just blank. And unfortunately, I can't show you guys that for this review. But from this screen, you can scroll through a lot of information and customize what you see from the screen in front of you. So of course, you can check out your fuel economy statistics, then of course your trip computer, and your tire pressure monitoring system. But you can also configure this screen to your liking. And when you press OK, this gives you a menu where you can check off some things that you want to see displayed, or maybe things that are not relevant to you, such as trip 2, maybe you just want to use trip 1, or your off-road statistics, which maybe you will never use because you're going to just be on pavement all the time. Your temperature gauges, your trailer light status, and also your seatbelt reminder. All this can be added to this display, and we saw this before in earlier Ford Explorer products. But all eyes will be focused on this 13.2-inch touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility, which now utilizes Google built-in software. And we're seeing a lot more of this now in the automotive industry. I have a feeling a lot of manufacturers are just going to use Android-based technology from here on out because it is cleanly laid out. Also, it pairs up very well with your phone. What I also like too is that compared to the Sync 3 and Sync 4 systems in earlier Explorers, this is a major leap forward. I also think it is easier to use, and the resolution and quality is pretty top notch. Now, some people will disagree with me on that though, because for 2025, you don't have buttons or dials for your dual zone climate control, heated front seats, heated steering wheel, AC, or fan speed and fan direction. That'll all be placed at the bottom of the screen. We're seeing a lot of this now in the automotive industry. And I have to say, and I'm not trying to compare this to a luxury manufacturer in any way, shape, or form, so don't take this out of context. But the layout of this user interface for the Ford Explorer is very reminiscent to the iDrive 9 user interface in new BMW products, such as the new X3, but also the X1 as well. And the reason why I say that is not only because of the climate control settings being at the bottom of the screen, but you now have a layout with all your widgets in place and within arm's reach, very similar to the iDrive 9 system that we had just checked out a couple of weeks ago. Now, with this screen, you can watch YouTube videos, which, again, I think it's a gimmick. I think a lot of this technology is a gimmick, but when your vehicle is parked, you can watch YouTube videos, maybe even entertain the kids in the second row. kind of cool stuff here. Also, of course, you can display the Google Maps, your Google Assistant. And then just like we saw with the Sync 4, you're going to have all your vehicle information and vehicle settings from here as well. And you can scroll through all these at your own discretion and when you do pick up your Explorer for the first time. But it's all laid out very similarly to what you had in prior model years. Beneath the head unit, you will find a row of buttons here for your auto start stop, park assist features, your camera systems, and your traction control on and off button, and you will have a dial for the volume. Just beneath that will be a tray for a smartphone or wallet. But one thing I will say though is that for 2025 you have a lot of cubbies here. So for the center console itself, you will have a deep storage compartment for a couple smartphones or smaller gadgets. You're going to notice a USB-C and USB-A outlet and a 12-volt outlet as well. For the center console itself, nothing different here at all, but one thing I do like though is that you won't have gloss black trim. So this will be easier to clean and probably easier to maintain throughout the years of ownership. You'll have the dial for your gear selector here, so nothing different in that regard. Your electronic parking brake, and then your drive mode selector. So you will have a terrain management system here for off-road mode, slippery, normal, eco, sport, and tow and haul. So similar to what you had last year. Then for the standard storage compartment, you can store a lot of items here, probably even some smaller water bottles, and maybe even some gadgets or some smaller toys for your kids in the second row. This is actually very usable space here, and I'm really glad to see that because a lot of vehicles in this market, it's not as deep, it's not as versatile or as practical in that regard. Then to wrap up the front seating area, our model does have the panoramic vista moonroof, which brings in a lot of natural light to the interior. And it's really great to see that Ford is offering that for the Actives. You don't have to go higher up in the trim levels to receive some creature comforts. Moving on to the second row, since we do have the Active Comfort package equipped on our model, we have captain's chairs, which this is the optimal choice if you are looking for a vehicle that is a bit more upscale at around $50,000. I also have to say that if you don't need a vehicle that can seat 7 and you just have maybe 2 or 3 people in the back, this is going to be a great choice. Now, of course, the Active X seating material is so comfortable and it adds a lot to this trim, which is why I think you got to go with it over the cloth upholstery. Now, just like we saw with the XLT 2 years ago, these seats do slide on rails. You can move them forwards and backwards to maximize legroom for the second and third row, and they do recline a bit by about maybe 5 degrees. So that will maximize headroom, but that shouldn't be too much of an issue with a vehicle with a traditional SUV roofline. Headroom isn't too bad in the Explorer, so I think taller passengers can sit back here quite comfortably and not hit their head on the headliner. Now, also another thing too I want to point out here is that when it comes to legroom, you have right around 39 inches, which is very competitive with the Honda Pilot and Toyota Highlander. Now, a lot of journalists like to point out that the Explorer isn't as practical or as spacious as what you're going to find with other vehicles in this market. But then you start looking at the competitors, even outside of Honda and Toyota, the Explorer falls right in line with those vehicles in regards to interior dimensions and legroom is the most important. Also back here for the second row, I do like the nice Explorer badge imprinted on the center console. You will have climate control, and you can adjust where the fan direction is going to be and fan speed. You have 2 USB-C inputs, a 12-volt outlet, and then to round out the second row seating area, you will have 2 cup holders for that center console. Then for the third row, hopefully you guys can see me all the way back here, passengers should not be complaining about lack of space because this isn't relatively too bad. I've experienced far worse in this market. At 32 inches of legroom, this falls right in line with the Honda Pilot once again and is a little bit better than the Toyota Highlander. Compared to 2 other crossovers I've experienced in the past, such as the Nissan Pathfinder and Subaru Ascent, I think this is a bit more spacious. So if you are looking for a vehicle where you can squeeze in some smaller kids in the third row, you can definitely do that for sure. Obviously, though, with the Explorer, these seats are bolted to the floor, so I am sitting a bit more of a ball. But one thing I do like, though, since we don't have the bench seats for the second row, I can at least extend my left leg, or if I was sitting on the driver's side, my right leg. So it's not going to be too cramped or claustrophobic. Also, this seat is adjusted all the way back, and I still have about maybe 2 or 3 inches of legroom. That's not too bad at all. Headroom, more than adequate. I think you definitely have some average-sized adults sit in the third row relatively comfortably, and they will not be hitting their head on the headliner. So with the Ford Explorer, it is practical, it is family-friendly, and that's honestly all you could ask for out of the 3-row SUV that isn't the size of an Expedition or Cadillac Escalade. Also on both sides of the third row, you will have cup holders, and on the passenger side will be 2 USB-C inputs to charge up smartphones or other tech gadgets. Then making our way around to the back one more time, take a look at the rear cargo area. For 2025 on our model, we do have a power liftgate. And inside, behind the third row seats, you're looking at right around 16 cubic feet of room. If you know me, I like having close to 20 cubic feet of room for a vehicle in this market. And actually last year, Ford claimed you had about 18 cubic feet. So I'm trying to figure out how the 2 cubic feet was lost from one model year to the next, despite the fact this is the exact same generation. But regardless, I was able to fit all my camera gear today, no problem. So that's 3 bags of camera gear, a gimbal box, and a tripod. And that's really all I could ask for out of a vehicle of this size. For some crossovers with a third row, I had to lower the third row seats to put all my camera gear in. But with the Explorer, that wasn't an issue at all. So I do think that if you have kids in the third row, you can put most of your groceries back here with no issues. On top of that, you are going to have a compartment beneath the floor mat for some smaller items, maybe even a small bag or 2, laptops or iPads, or just valuables you don't want people stealing when you do leave this vehicle unattended for a while. Then with the third row seats folded, you're looking at right around 46 cubic feet of room, which is on par with a lot of vehicles in this market. So if you're just using the Explorer as a 2-row crossover, this will be more than adequate for sure. And then finally, with the second row seats folded, you have an overall car capacity of around 85.5 cubic feet of room. So not class leading, but falls right in line with other vehicles in this market. And I do think it is very practical for an SUV coming in at just over 40 grand, but for our model, just under $50,000. And lastly, for the 2025 Ford Explorer Active, you are going to receive the 2.3-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, producing 300 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque, basically the same numbers as last year, and it is paired with a 10-speed automatic transmission, which Ford claims has been retuned. So I'm looking forward to seeing if they've added some refinement to this transmission, because 2 years ago with the XLT, it was a bit sloppy, and 10 speeds is quite a lot for a vehicle in this market. Now, just like I mentioned earlier on in this video, you can go with rear-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, basically all-wheel drive, since this isn't a body-on-frame SUV. And honestly, living up here in New England, you're going to want to go with that all-wheel drive system for better year-round capability and versatility. One thing I do like, though, about the Explorer is that it is rear-wheel drive based, whereas a lot of manufacturers in this market are still front-wheel drive based. Mechanically speaking, though, for 2025, nothing's different here at all in regards to how it performs on the roadways, how it handles in corners. I didn't read anything in the press release that Ford retuned the steering input, but I do like the fact that there is some weight to it. It's not light, it's not vague, it's not leaving more to be desired out of an SUV like this. Obviously, I think a lot of buyers will be striving for an ST, and that would be the direction to go in, especially with the V6. But out of its closest rivals, though, for a vehicle that is built on a unibody chassis, it rides like a vehicle that is built on a body-on-frame. And it has the mannerisms and characteristics. It feels like a truck. But you get those benefits while still having a suspension that is tuned quite comfortably. And when you go over the bumps and imperfections, you really don't feel them at all. And one thing that Ford did prioritize for this mid-cycle refresh is interior quality and interior insulation. And I have to say, even with the 20-inch wheels that we have on our model today, it's not affecting ride quality or really giving you a lot more road noise when you are driving on the back roads, especially at around 40 miles an hour. Now, as you can tell, I am in sport mode. I like the sound that is being pumped in. I don't think this is authentic at all, but it does give the Explorer some character and some charisma that maybe some of you are looking for in this market. As you approach these corners here, there is some body roll at around 40 miles an hour, but that's to be expected since this isn't going to be a vehicle with a lower center of gravity. Just like I experienced 2 years ago, you do sit pretty high up being behind the wheel of the Explorer. It gives you a nice commanding feel and presence over the roadways. The A-pillars are somewhat thin, so you won't have any blind spots when you are approaching intersections or red lights. Your side mirrors are decently sized. I can see what's in my blind spots and in the lane next to me. And then looking out back, nice clear view. Obviously, I do have the third row seats folded for this test drive. But for me, though, for 2025, it's the interior quality, it's the driving environment that has really impressed me so far. That's the main takeaway for this SUV, because yes, Ford was falling behind. A lot of journalists have been saying that the Explorer isn't as luxurious or as upscale as its closest rivals. But then when you take a look at sales figures, Ford is outselling all of its closest competition, such as the Honda Pilot and Toyota Highlander. So when you take a look at those numbers, you're like, well, maybe buyers prefer the Explorer at the end of the day. And you got to keep in mind that, yeah, okay, you want to have a lot of technology, maybe leather seats, or just have a vehicle that does feel like a luxury crossover. But a lot of buyers in this market have smaller kids. Do they really want to have a luxurious vehicle at $50,000 when their kids are going to be spilling drinks, maybe getting car sick? I mean, I think what the Explorer is offering is exactly what American families are looking for. It's decently sized, a lot of interior space, and it is pretty comfortable. Now, sadly, Ford didn't address the braking for this SUV. I would like to see stronger brakes. Maybe that will be experienced with the ST. Hopefully I get my hands on one pretty soon. But I do notice that there is some travel here when you are on the brakes. So that is one thing I would like to see Ford address maybe for next generation. But I do like the steering wheel. It feels very nice in the hands. Firm 9-3 grips, not very aggressive 10-2, but that's perfectly fine. And also with the steering input, with it having some weight to it, you can maneuver your way around on some back roads like I'm on right now. I do like the linear power band of the 2.3-liter turbo. While some buyers may feel the V6 is the better alternative, the 2.3 is providing more than enough power for daily driving situations. Now, despite the fact that the Explorer has grown quite a bit in size throughout the last few generations, it maneuvers these tight back roads quite well. On the brakes, not too bad. Heading out of the corner, smooth, very smooth. And obviously, with a vehicle of this size, with a lack of a lower center of gravity, there is some body roll. Now, since I have been behind the wheel for about 20 minutes or so, the transmission is quite smooth here, but I am going to put it back in normal. Because in Sport, the gear shifts are quite crisp. They've definitely added some refinement to the transmission. That's exactly what I wanted to see here. Because mechanically, that has been the only upgrade for 2025, and I think Ford has definitely addressed one of the weak points for the earlier model years for this generation. Not too bad, not too bad at all. I would say that in regards to straight line speed, also with the upshifting, this is very competitive with other crossovers in this market. Now, comparing this to a Toyota Highlander or even a Honda Pilot, I think the Explorer feels more sporty than the Honda Pilot. The Honda Pilot does feel very rugged. It's a very SUV-like for sure in its market. Toyota Highlander, not so much. Dropping the V6, I think, was a huge mistake. And then, of course, with the Subaru Ascent, CVT, not as refined, not as fun to drive. Now, I do think, though, a lot of people now, a lot of journalists, maybe even some buyers, are going to point to the Mazda CX-90, CX-70, possibly the Kia Telluride and Hyundai Palisade. I do think the Mazda CX-70 and CX-90 is leaning more towards a luxurious experience. It does feel like a poor man's BMW X5. The Ford Explorer isn't going to exhibit those attributes. But for those of you who are looking for an SUV at around $50,000, you want a vehicle that gives you some of the creature comforts, the quality, but also maybe even some of the ruggedness as well. It kind of balances being a bit more upscale, at least with the packages that we have equipped on our model today, but also the fact that this is a rear-wheel drive based vehicle. It gives you the best of both worlds. And I think that for a lot of buyers who are not looking for the most luxurious experience, they're not looking for the most technology, being behind the wheel, I think they're going to find themselves right at home being behind the wheel of the Explorer. I do think this is a nice upgrade over last model year for sure with the new technology. And then of course, what Ford has done with the interior quality, this really is a nice leap for sure. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this quick review for the 2025 Ford Explorer Active. If you did, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys next time.